Chris Carpenter with Merito. I've got a very special video we wanted to record for you today. One of the use cases we have is that our partnership with Anthropic is in full force and we need to update our website. We've got a couple different frameworks that we support as part of the partnership. The first one is where we actually deploy Claude Code Enterprise. This is specifically for developers, and it targets agentic command line interface inside of workstations and pipelines. So this would not pertain to any non-developers. Non-developers wouldn't have access to the work product that we create. No packaged applications would be in scope for that. The second framework is specifically for the Claude Developer Platform. And this is where your developers are actually running Claude code themselves. The client also wants to use programmatic API integration for CI/CD, plus also a limited use of Claude.ai, which is where our quality assurance leads, business analysts, and our release managers would all be using Claude and then also interacting with the developers and the work that they're doing. Again, no packaged application scope would be included in that framework. However, in our framework C, we've actually built out an entire offering where we target commercial off-the-shelf and packaged applications. So this would include SAP, Salesforce, Oracle, Workday, ServiceNow, pretty much any of the primary packaged platforms that you could think of. It would cover the custom development for each one of those platforms. Some examples of the custom development that would cover would be ABAP, Apex, LWC, flows, BPTs, configuration work. This would also include any of the functional work that's being done. It would address any of the needs of the business power users, and then also any of the platform test engineers, people that are doing system integration testing, and even some of them that are doing user acceptance testing, we could group into this framework. This is primarily targeting the vendor release management. That's really the primary driver for that framework. We also have a Claude Workplace framework. This is our framework D. This is the non-developer entry point. So if you think about all of the Claude use cases, it makes so much sense for developers to be using Claude, but other areas of the business can massively benefit with Claude.ai. And that's where we would focus on specific projects and teams, creating different artifacts in Claude itself, and also co-work and storing files and using memory and connectors. Think about all of the different teams that might benefit from the use of AI where it doesn't actually pertain to development. The legal team could actually be reviewing specific clauses within their contracts. They might, every once in a while, have brain fog and might need to actually just word a sentence. And if you can have Claude spit something out and then you actually go back and clean up the 20% that it didn't quite get right or didn't quite match any of your existing contract clauses, that right there would save a tremendous amount of time. The marketing team, generating content is so arduous, and being able to run a few iterations through Claude first before you present it to the rest of the team really alleviates a lot of iterations and cycles. Sales team should definitely be using Claude for coming up with sales strategies, identifying your ideal customer profiles, anything that's any sort of outreach or staying up to date. There's so much data out there. Sales can massively benefit as well. Finance teams might be using it to generate reports. Anyway, the list goes on. Claude Workplace framework is where a lot of that gets set up. Again, that's not tied towards the engineering team or any of the packaged application. That is for business users to increase their productivity throughout the day. And then we have our framework E, which ties everything together. This is what we call the Claude Enterprise Platform framework. This is a full composition framework, and it combines all services specific to the frameworks A, B, C, and D. It's its own enterprise unification layer, and it applies when Claude is being used and adopted across the entire enterprise. And it touches, again, all services in scope, the licenses, the management, the tracking, the usage, and making sure we have a persona playbook library that is modular in its approach, and it applies to every different entity or line of business or persona within your organization that might be trying to adopt Claude. So let's go ahead and dive into it. First, I want to show you what we actually have on our website today. So I'm going to go into demo mode here. So I've got our website right now. I'm going to go to our solutions and navigate to our agentic AI developments solution offering. So this is somewhat outdated. This is a perfect customer use case. We've got to go update our system. Keep in mind, this is not just a normal website. This is a marketing function. This is where people find us, and it exposes all of our solutions, our services, the vendors we support. We've got blogs and downloadable. It's a true system in its own right. And my team's responsible primarily for making sure it stays relevant with content, making sure that the system's actually working. So in terms of what it is displaying right now, it touches on Claude and agentic development. And I want to make sure that we actually have the 4 different frameworks that are relevant. You can actually see we see a bug here. This is in private mode, and each one of our operating modules are not updating. So I'll create a bug for that here in a second. User story web 399. This is what we're going to be addressing. I've already typed out a lot of the user story itself, and I've got a lot of the content already created, and I've got it broken into different phases as well. With every user story, we'll make sure we have our user acceptance criteria, and we've got all of that. So the business specification is already created, and that's stored in Jira. So I'm going to head over to my IDE and show you what we're working with. All right, give you a little bit of lay of the land here. This is your typical React.js repository. I'm not going to show you going to the code, but a couple things that we've set up. I've got a couple slash commands in here. This is my marketing report. So we actually tie into Google's MCP, but then we also have our code base and our blog backups and all of the data that you might find within a system. And then we also have different commands. These are all slash commands. So these are prepackaged where we will be able to quickly reference whatever commands we want to execute. So this one will actually go out and interact with Jira's MCP, and also some of the APIs aren't exposed in their MCP, so we actually go out and execute those directly. And then we also have a post to CMS, and we also have the ship. The ship is what we're going to actually push this user story with. We do have everything that's buttoned together where different MD files, which for those of you that are new to this, MD stands for Markdown. That's how we build out these instruction files. Now, it's important to know that these command files are supposed to be local to the developer instance itself. And that's one of the framework designs that we include in our audit, our assessment that we do. Just wanted to go through some of those. We also have our skills. Every single time that I push an update, which a lot of times I'm not in here doing a whole lot of work, but the development team, the web dev team are the ones who are actually doing a majority of the work. And they're the ones that are looking at the design specs in Jira, pulling them into the IDE, and then actually working them and shipping them. And then we've got an entire team that does the testing as well. Something is pushed, we actually go out and we've got several pieces of acceptance criteria for all of the different pages that we have on our site. And some of them are different and they have different criteria, but we want to make sure that we're actually building out proper search engine optimization, generative engine optimization. We want to make sure that our pages and our controls are accessible as well. So that's one of the validations that we do to make sure people varying abilities can actually interact and work with our site. We also have some content generation abilities. So we've got different partners that we support. They do some of our application security testing tools, Sonatype, Nexus One, Nexus Repository. But anyways, this is some of the data that we've got locally. So we can pull from this and actually compare to some of the data that's exposed online. So as it changes over time, we've got a reference and we've got some briefs for that. We also have some briefs on the vendors themselves. We see Atlassian in 80% of the customers that we support. And we've got several different offerings tied to Atlassian. So we want to make sure that our website is up to date for all of the vendors and all of the products that our vendors provide as well. And we also have just some positioning and overall just the things that you would do to generate content with AI. We want to make sure that when our developers are creating features and deploying content, we will supplement it with real world data based off of whatever context we supply the agents. We also have built-in testing frameworks. You can see we've got our Playwright. Depending on the repository that we are working in, we might use Vitest, we might use Unified Functional Testing Developer, we might use Tosca, we might use the Rapise tool from Inflectra. Depending on the technologies and the integrations we also need to test, will determine what we might do in terms of testing. But anyways, getting kind of down into the weeds there. What I wanted to show you is how easy it is for us to actually create content. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say plan, and our user story that we were going to deploy was mweb 399. Because I've got my plan / command, this is going to go out and do a lot of the work for me. This is going to just go out and fetch the ticket, and it's going to check what branch I'm actually working on. This is going out and looking at all of the product page skill files because it knows that we are updating Claude. You can see that it's referencing the Secure Code Warrior and open text content. So it found some content on the existing page which referenced those two different pillars. It now thinks that it has a solid idea of what it's going to write the files to. And keep in mind that we have the functional spec pretty much built out in Jira itself. So the user story, the ticket has most of the data, but it is going to reference the repository, and it's going to use that as context as well, which is really awesome. I'll talk a little bit about some of the frameworks. So I mentioned the 5 different frameworks. Each one of those actually has what we call the universal backbone across all 5 of those frameworks. The first thing that we do is we come in and we actually help you define what the purpose and the scope of your AI engagement is. I can't tell you how many people out there right now are talking about AI, and the ones that are not talking about it are the ones that are falling behind. So you really need to have that AI story if you want to stay relevant in the industry these days. It's moving so fast, and this is one of the things that we can help you with. What does your business do today, and how can we use AI to supplement some of those tasks and create value within your organization? We'll actually look at your architecture. We'll look to see for a layered view and see where Claude can fit throughout your environment. And that is to say that it doesn't just sit at the development layer. It can sit all the way from just creating PowerPoint decks and reporting out to various projects or programs. We also look at the identity, the access, the tenancy for maybe you need to deploy single sign-on, right? That might be an organizational requirement, and we can help you think through the requirements for what that might look like. And you have an org structure. And so how does that fit into your license schema? Who gets licenses? What happens when you run out of context tokens and you need to supplement the team with more? What does that approval process look like? Something as simple as how do users get provisioned? All things that we can help with. Very importantly, the deployment model. So when you actually are ready to make this available to the masses, how does Claude get installed? How is it configured out of the gate? What's the golden image look like for a Claude deployment? And how does it get updated, right? When there's a new model pushed, who gets access to that? How does that work? How does that become available? All of those things are really important. So we don't just flip on a switch and pray that people will know what to do, when to do it, and who to reach out to when they actually have a problem. And that kind of ties into some of the governance and guardrails. So everything that we do, we want to make sure that everyone is clear on what is okay and what is not okay. We'll look at policies and what are allowed operations, look at any of the red lines in any of those contracts and those policies, and also make sure that you've got some sort of audit logging that is stood up. We also look at the Toolchain integration. So we know that Claude is very good with its large language model. It's got a ton of context already built in, but at the end of the day, it's just predicting what the next word is in whatever question or task you assigned it. And it is empowered by the ability to add additional context. So we can do RAG, we can develop tools that actually integrate with whatever tertiary systems you have within your organization. But that's what we look at. We look at toolchain integration and how Claude can bind to your client systems and build out additional context. So let me go ahead and stop there. We'll come back to the universal backbone in a second, but let's take a look to see what Claude did here. Summarize the data from ticket 399, and it recognized that we have the 5 different frameworks. It listed out what those frameworks are. So I talked about the frameworks that Merito provides, but along with the framework that's a part of the solution, we also have services. So services will help you adopt that solution. And no one service is going to fit all of your needs. A lot of times it's a la carte, where you take bits and pieces of one service and then you do a lot of the work yourself. So we're very flexible and agile. It looks like it took in 8 services total around the Claude offering. It means that it looked at the existing services we had and it picked out and said, well, these 8 services don't actually fit the implementation service that you have. The implementation service is too broad, and we need to actually look at creating an AI strategy and roadmap service where you actually take your use cases and apply business cases to those. We'll actually look at absorbing your use cases and on your business cases as well, and actually creating a roadmap for you. We've got our proposed branch, so it's going to cut it from lab, which it hasn't created yet, so it recognizes where we are in the repository and in the commit cycle. And then it actually lists out the different files that are going to be updated. So that's fantastic. Those are new files, and these are the files that are going to be edited. And then the actual plan. This is the bread and butter. So phase 0, it's going to create the branch, and we're going to write to the Anthropic MD. So that's going to create the actual content based on the content I already have and the content that I created within the ticket. And then it's going to go into phase 1. Phase 1 is all about creating the product cards and then the hero image and creating our frequently asked question frameworks. And then phase 2 goes into the individual service pages. So it's important to note right here what it's doing, because I know this repo. It's going to update the solution page. Then it's going to create 8 different child solution pages, and it's going to populate those based off of the templates that we've got in our repository. So it's using the repository as context, which is fantastic. And then it's going to populate the data. I think that sounds like a solid plan. Here we've got phase 4, which is validate. And I specifically told it not to pause between phases. Depending on the framework you're adopting, or even if you're adopting any of our frameworks, you can create your own. We'd love to help you create that and base it off of some of the frameworks we've seen work for other customers. However, if you're using our frameworks, all of them have a facilitator loop built in, which is exactly what I'm doing right now, where I'm looking at the proposed work to be done and looking to see if there's any glaring problems. And right now I don't see any. So I'm going to tell it to proceed with all phases. So we'll be able to see what files are updating. And of course, we're gonna review all of this work. So this is not agentic in the truest form of the word. What we are using, though, is we are using Claude, and it will spawn off sub-agents. So sub-agents are essentially going out and doing work in parallel. So it's got, think of it as like multi-threaded. In a true agentic framework, we'd be divvying up work and we'd be sending it to various agents that have very specific skills. So if I had an agent that was specifically dedicated towards my material management data, it was to do migrations and very important work. We want to make sure that we don't mess that up. That agent we would trim down the context and make sure that it would focus only on that one task. And that's one way to alleviate hallucinations. Other tasks might include my Google Analytics. That's one of the primary data tools that we collect to make sure that we're providing a good experience to our customers. We also have several other analytics tools, but if I had any agent work, then I would send that off to my agent to perform my analytic updates. Anyways, we're gonna let that run. I'm gonna keep talking about the universal backbone. I think we're talking about the toolchain integration. You can see right now that I've got a flavor of a Jira integration. We interact with MCP, but we also have some direct APIs that we call. We also have Inflectra Spira to facilitate the aggregation of all of our test management. That our repo has manual test cases because some of those test cases just simply can't be automated. And the ones that can be automated, we want to make sure that those are continued to be updated, whether that's with Playwright, Selenium, Cypress. You might be using Tosca, you might be using Rapise from Inflectra. Whatever the automation engine, those are completely in scope. And we can actually tie most of those tools into Claude as well. So anytime that we make an update to a form, maybe there's another required field, we can update all of our automated test cases that form has coverage for. The other thing we can do is the manual test cases. So in Inflectra Spira, we are able to have manual test cases. The repository that we have here, we're going to be adding a page, so we don't have anything specific to our Claude framework where they would enter data and maybe we wouldn't collect any of their data, but we do want to make sure that someone manually inspects this page. And so we've got test cases where people navigate to a page and we include those links in the page. So they don't have to look and type in the address or go find the navigation menu and actually click down to vendor and Inflectra and then the product page that they need to view. The manual test case automatically gets updated with the URL. So they can see what the expected result is, and then they can enter their actual result. And all of those test cases get stored in Inflectra Spira. As they execute them, they get a failure or a pass, and we can see the quality of the release at any time. So that's the missing piece right now with a lot of agentic workflows. Things are getting updated, and they're getting updated so fast that things get stale. And with an integration with Spira, we're now able to allow the manual testers to contribute and have our fast-paced releases also have fast-paced testing. So this release is going to go out. The team's going to get notified that test cases 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever test cases we're going to update here, all of those will be updated, which will give them a queue to work on so they know that those tests have to be executed manually. Now, you might ask, wouldn't that be a really good use case for automation? Absolutely. We want to make sure that we are running automated test cases. I can run some Python scripts and also some of our automated test suite. We do still have the manual testing, and those are very important test cases. So for those of you that have said quality assurance is going away, we can just trust AI, 100% not the case. We just work in slightly different ways. And so AI is great to enable our teams to work faster. And you can see here, like, I'm not even really that good of a developer. And I'm facilitating the updating of a very important system to Merito. We live on Slack every day. If we don't do a whole lot of development in there, but we do have some custom apps that integrate that would probably add a few hours to everybody's week if those tools went down. So when those get updated, those are a big deal and those get tested. And we test those with automated scripts and we do manual testing. The toolchain integration and having test management really brings the focus into the work that's actually being done, like Jira. So we've got Jira that manages our backlog and the work that is being created and also developed and produced. But the testing is what's important because the test documentation gets stale so quickly. So as we're making these updates, we can create a skill that says to go out and update the relevant test cases based off of doing a grep and pulling in all the potential test cases and then triaging which ones are actually affected by creating a new vendor called Anthropic. So any test case that touches Anthropic will be updated. And of course, those quick navigation links are also updated because we might be adjusting the structure of our routing on this particular application. I talked about the Facilitator Loop operating model. Every single one of our frameworks touches on that. The canonical Merito doctrine for how humans orchestrate Claude work. That's the best way I can put it. It promotes the output through the delivery stages, and you have that person that's facilitating and actually making sure that the output is creating what we asked it to, and also making sure that we correct it when it doesn't. I guarantee we're going to have something here that's not going to go as expected. And so we're going to go through a couple iterations. Probably won't record all of that. I just want to show you what this looks like and how it actually creates our user story and then actually generates the changes in our repository. The other thing that we do in our universal backbone is the adoption and enablement. So you can't just flip on a switch and give a license to somebody and expect that they're going to, one, know what to do, and two, you're going to find people that find creative things to do with the tools. And so making sure that there's proper training and onboarding, making sure that people understand what those prompt patterns are, making sure they understand what the escalation paths are. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into an organization and we start uncovering what they thought their implementation of a brand new tool was going to look like. And we ask them, who do they go to when they've got a ticket? When the tool's not installed on the machine, who do they reach out to? What's the intake process? And that all comes down to operationalizing the new tool. One other item that we do for the universal backbone is metrics and reporting. So while we have the adoption and enablement, it's very valuable to see what your adoption metrics are. Most importantly, with metrics and reporting, what I absolutely love focusing on is the value rationalization and realization. So making sure we know what we expect and making sure that we've got a metric to track towards that goal. But if we're not seeing a lot of users embrace the tool, the usage is down from where we expect it to be, what is the cause and how can we rectify that? And then just defining what those acceptance rates are. The roadmap, we've all created and worked off of roadmaps before, but we've seen Claude work at many organizations, and that's what's becoming one of our core competencies. We've always focused on software development lifecycle tools, and because developers have so much important work, being able to do something like what we're showing right now is massively huge for the speeding up the pipelines and actually getting changes to customers faster. We want to help you learn what other successful roadmaps entailed and how that can potentially apply to your business. And with that roadmap, we have roles and responsibilities, got the RACI matrix if you want to use a RACI matrix. Ultimately create that tool configuration checklist. What will it take to go live, and are we ready? What gates can we put in place to make sure that our teams are ready to go when we actually do flip that switch? So that's the universal backbone. The engineering backbone has a few more items to it, like Git strategy and branching. What does the branch model look like? What are the naming conventions? Are we protecting different branches and whatnot? What does it actually look like to do a pull request? What does the review model look like? And what's the human to machine review ratio? And when there are issues, what happens and how do we prevent it from happening again? What's the writer reviewer discipline, and what are those approval gates for each one of those pull requests? Talked a little bit about the test engineering, whether it's functional, system integration testing, user acceptance testing, performance testing. We want to make sure that our code is performant, because we know that AI can create slop. I guarantee that this is going to create a few extra lines of code. I'm going to go through and actually prune some of the things and try to make sure that it's as efficient as possible. A very important type of testing is the security testing. So we've all seen references to Mythos and some of the things that Claude Security can do. Keep in mind that the Mythos is great, it's fantastic, but at the end of the day, it's best when it's paired with a testing tool, an application security testing tool that works for your business. We want to make sure that we're still doing our static scans and we're still doing our dynamic application security testing. We absolutely need to make sure that we have SBOMs created, or that's your software bill of materials. It's such an easy thing to build into the pipeline. I don't know why we wouldn't have an SBOM. And the test engineering is something that we would sit down and take a really long, hard look at to make sure that we've got a verification loop built in to our pipeline. Apart from doing your security scans and your application security testing, we want to make sure that we are doing secure development practices in general. We've got a secret management system where all of our important client secret credentials are stored. We've got a least privilege model as well. We also have our DevSecOps pipeline architecture. That would be the canonical pipeline stages and where Claude is invoked. It might make more sense to have a human do some work, making sure that we have the proper pipeline stages defined, and we all agree where Claude makes the most sense to sit, and also what makes sense to actually have a human in the loop or have someone participate as a facilitator in that model. Outside of the universal backbone that has the 12 stages and then the additional 17 total for the engineering background, we've got individual add-ons for each one of the frameworks. So for Claude Code, remember I talked about the command line interface installation and version control, and also the configuration hierarchy for where we store MCP files and what rules are the path to actual gating itself, and what commands and agents and skills and directories, and what's the monorepo cascade behavior. So many things we can talk about for just that one bullet point item. The hook catalog and subagent patterns. How does that all tie together, right? Those are some of the things that we would talk about for that specific framework. And then just to rattle off a few for the packaged apps team, for the commercial off-the-shelf team, we'd actually go in and look at the overall inventory for all of your different packaged apps, whether that's SAP, and if you're on ECC still, or S4HANA, maybe you're rolling out Salesforce and what modules there using Sales or Commerce Clouds, are using Apex, LWC. How many different orgs do you have? We had a customer that had 130 different orgs, and pushing changes across all of those was quite the tedious task. But we were able to go in there and leverage a framework of Claude Code and Playwright and change how they actually do testing. For any of you that do automated testing or have done automated testing, that Shadow DOM is one of the craziest things to automate through your test data management strategy. And so being able to work Claude into that framework was probably, it just brought me great joy watching that all come together. A part of that framework, we would do our pre-release impact analysis as something that we might look into. We would also look to see what platform specific security you might have. So SAP, for example, you've got your authorization object review on custom programs, your RFC functions. You might have group exposure controls, your BTP extension permission scopes. Like, there's so many things that you can have for your platform security on an SAP system, just as one of many examples. But there's also your integration patterns. For example, you've got ADT for ABAP development. You've got Claude with Salesforce, DX, command line interface. You also have your Claude assisted flow and screen design. You can have a separate spin-off framework depending on how your business gets things done. And of course, my favorite thing is actually empowering the business users themselves. So if you've got someone who's a power user in creating reports and giving them the keys to the kingdom, giving them access to something that can synthesize data and watching the reports that they can generate quickly is absolutely amazing. You can see on the left-hand side, this is our source control, the changes that we've got over there. I like to take a look at what is being written and where. So one of the biggest problems we had when we first adopted Claude was its ability to actually store things in the correct place. So we ended up with rogue files in random places. I think we got most of that addressed with the existing framework, but those are problems you're going to run into if you're doing a net new implementation of Claude. You can see that there's a couple other pages that are created here. We've got our services page, how our website's set up. We've got constants files, so the data actually lives in our constants placeholder. So You can see here that this is an agentic development, and that's not what we called it originally. So that's getting updated. I think I like that better. I'll have to check to see what keywords and rankings AI and agentic development get. Of course, if anyone that's watching this video has any recommendations, let me know. Love to get the word out about our offering. And just clicking through here, we've got our DQ University. So this is adding metadata across our different vendors. And so DQ, I can talk about them for a second. DQ University is our accessibility partner. So any company that is developing a customer facing, and I use the word customer, whether that's internal or external, but that customer facing application needs to be accessible in that someone who has a visual disability or some sort of impairment can interact with our site. So it's not just can they, maybe they are blind, maybe they're 20% blind, whatever it might be. They might be missing an appendage, or they might have something that prohibits them from consuming the data like anybody else. And we want to make sure that the way that we structure our web page, that they can actually go through and interact with our site. And so DQ is our partner for making sure that happens. They got a lot of great tools, and we resell those tools also. So if you're interested in accessibility testing, let me know. Lots of great things we can do with Claude, but Claude doesn't catch everything. And yeah, so everything's looking pretty good in terms of where, like, just the general layout. I know that we've got these utilities, but everything looks good. So over here on the right-hand side, we can see, let's go ahead and quickly scroll. We can see what it did. It gives us a synopsis. It says that all of the phases are complete. And I'm just scrolling through and reading. We got our 8 AI service pages. I'm very curious how those look. So it deviated a little bit. It says that we got service links and vendor links. We have a hub and 8 services. Okay. Subproduct pages. So Anthropic is rolling out a ton of applications, a ton of different products. It's kind of hard to keep up with them because they're creating so many great things. But we'll eventually get our product pages, and we'll go through the exact same process that we have here. Here it's telling us that it added a lightweight text watermark. So it did not actually add the Anthropic logo. So I'm not going to deploy this to production today. But if I fix that, I probably could think about if it actually passes our quality gates. Here we've got our consultation. It creates the different frameworks, and it adds the slug. That's something I did not ask for, but glad that it created it. Let's go over to my other screen. So we've spun up. This is our this is on localhost. Is this customer facing? It's close. It's close. For the amount of work I put into it, which very little effort, sat here and got to talk to you about different things. It's pretty good. Yep, that matches a lot of the content that we had. All right, so here's our vendors, home vendors, Anthropic. So we have our breadcrumbs up there. Design, deploy, operationalize, govern, and optimize. Looks great. Here you can see that that actually goes to book consultation. For those of you that are watching and you would like to get in touch with us, please feel free to fill out this form. Yeah, a couple things that I'm going to have to come back and work, like this might be okay. I'd probably rather have the enterprise maybe like wrapped around. So there's some design changes I'm going to make to this. It's based off of the template, so it didn't get it wrong, but again, I need it to be perfect. Well, I got a couple iterations to go through for sure. We have some services though, so each one of those, I'm just saying scope this framework, just clicking to see. So I know those are the consultation form. Doing some testing here. All right, well, these are the different services that we have. So I know that 1, 2, 3, 4 AI Center of Excellence is not something we had previously, and then Agent Build. FinOps is where we actually go in and make sure that you have your consumption under control. Migration, I feel like, is an existing service, and then it looks like the training and enablement, and then staff augmentation. All of those services previously existed. Remember, I told you that there are 14 services that existed before, but this is the service number 1. We had some good content in the Jira story itself, and then it went through and did a pretty good job here. Yeah, the different tenets of a roadmap offering, when to call us. This looks pretty good. timeline, discovery, use case, ROI, adoption, and then handoff. Perfect. Well, I think that looks pretty good. I'll go through this with the fine tooth comb, but here's the readiness. So what I like to do, because this is template based, it's generating things based off of the template that we've got for all of our services. And I like to change that hero image. So as you're comparing different services that might be beneficial to you, then I like to make sure that there's some differentiation. Cool. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go back that Anthropic logo. Let's take a look to see. Let's see. There is a skill that we can enable to actually go out and browse the internet, but I think it might actually automatically pull that in. We'll see here. What I think I'm going to do after it does this is I'm going to ship this so you can see the ship command, and then we'll call it done. But I do have at least one, probably 6 more iterations to go through and just make sure everything is in the right place. And everything looks pretty good based off of what I've seen, but I'm going to update hero images. I'm going to do those manually because it'll just be faster if I make those code changes than if I sit there and fight with Claude. This is a fantastic way to get more work done, but there still are things that you can do yourself that'll just be faster. That'll always be the case. Instead of typing out an entire paragraph for what you expect, you can just very easily go in, create something in Figma, and then maybe push it out to Claude, or maybe just doing the code update yourself. That also makes sense. Right now it has updated the Anthropic logo, and that's the logo I was expecting. Yep, perfect. On our website, we've got the page that we updated, which is our overall solution. And then it had a blurb about, where was it? Oh, here we go. So now it has the updated logo. So that's fantastic. As we adopt more large language models and LLM or AI platforms as a whole, there's only a couple of them out there today, but there might be more. Maybe that's Gemini or OpenAI or Perplexity kind of bundles them all together. But there might be other frameworks that we embrace. So that'll be good to have that there, and we can update, but it's got to make this look a little bit better. But that's not what I came here for. I do want to see what the vendor page looks like. But one thing it didn't do was when I click on the vendor's menu item, it takes me to all vendors. And in here, we should see Anthropic. It should have its own vendor category, but it does not. So my specification was lacking. So that's going to actually tell Claude to go focus specifically on that file. I could have done an add. There's a lot of different commands I can use to get things a little more refined. But you can see here, for those of you that haven't played around with Claude much in IDE, we can see that it was the correct logo. And then we realized that we didn't do our SEO audit. So we quickly did our SEO audit with our / command that we pre-created. And it's going through, looking at everything, confirmed that our metadata didn't have a length limit, and that would fail. So I went through and created that, which is good because that's one of our major strategies for this particular system, to make sure that we can interact with it and machines can interact with it. And then this was the vendor category, so it went through quickly and downloaded the latest version of the Anthropic logo and deployed it. We already tested that, so that one's good. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my browser, and we can see that this already updated, where it puts our application development management, application security, and accessibility, and then our AI and agentic development at the bottom. And what I'm questioning now is that my business requirement? Do I want AI down at the very bottom? That's a good question. I'm not sure what the answer is, so we'll go ahead and let that one be. The other thing I didn't tell AI to do was make sure that everything was, our dark mode is supported. You can see I'm just having fun now. The testers all handle this. Very, very key members of our team, especially when I'm actually in here in the repo doing stuff. So thank you guys for the work you do. Yeah, I mean, this is pretty good for being able to switch back and forth between dark mode. Granted, we've got all those patterns in our repository already, so it's not really a surprise. Every once in a while, you'll get a container or div that for some reason just didn't get updated. Then you get the, oops, I'm sorry, you're right to call that out error message that AI sometimes gives us. Cool. All right. Going back to our repo, it's still doing our SEO. It should be done here soon. It went through and fixed all of the JSON issues that we had. And then now it's doing its final validation. It's just going through and grepping the repo to make sure everything looks proper. Cool. It is finally done. Our meta tags, we want to make sure they're a certain length. Canonical OG, looking good. Structured data, breadcrumbs, accordion, make sure all that looks good. Can only have one A tag. Everything else is going to be H2 or 3. We've got some branded frequently asked questions, which get updated all the time on our end as people ask questions. So please ask questions in the comments of this video. And then 9 pages that were created have passed. Cool. I should probably run the, no, I don't need to run analytics because analytics only fire on the forms and there are no forms that no one's filling out data. So don't need to do that. Let's just run the old ship command here. So ship is going to aggregate all of the changes that we've done and it's going to group them into logical buckets, probably 4 because there are 4 phases to the user story itself, which quite honestly could have and probably should have been an epic if we were doing this work manually. But this is going to go through and group those changes together. It's going to commit those changes and then it's going to push those changes. It's going to go out to Jira and it's going to comment on the user story and also walk the user story from the current state that it's in, which should be defined. That's the status is defined. And then it should mark it all the way to dev complete. Our testers will go through, once it's ready, they'll mark it off as test complete. And from there, it'll give me a merge request description. And I'll create a merge request and merge it into the lab branch, which is where the testers will test. So I've got that order of operations were slightly skewed. But from there, and my job is done. Our build team, once the manual testers once they verify it, all of our automated tests will trigger at various points. So as soon as it does the ship, once it actually builds this specific version, the automated tests on this local machine will trigger. So those are unit tests for all intents and purposes. And then the next build for lab gets deployed. And then the manual testers will go in there, but the automated tests will also execute. And we've got a couple different systems that are integrated and it will, for example, verify that we can submit a form for consultation, just as you all will do here very shortly because you love this video so much. You'll book a consultation and so our automated agents will do that. Those will go out to our customer relationship management system. It'll create data over there, but then also notify in Slack. And we've got all of that built into our continuous deployment lifecycle. And once that gate passes and the manual test, as soon as they click pass on the final test case and all of the automated test cases have executed successfully, then that actually triggers a build that pushes out to our production server and goes live on the website. So we've got some gates and then also some metrics that we track to make sure that our testers are testing as quickly as possible, making sure that our automation is not stale, making sure our automation is good. The one thing that we don't have built into that yet, which I want to, is our performance testing. We do our automated application security scans as well. We've got those dialed in so well, just given the nature of our company. It would be good to performance test that. The problem is our infrastructure. So given how we work and the different containers that we've got stood up, I don't want to make the investment for a website. It is important to Merito, but it's not like we're a $30 billion company. And if our website goes down or if someone can't submit a lead or a consultation request, like it's bad, it sucks, it's not good, but it's not going to affect 200 million people at the end of the day. So I want to do more performance testing. We're really good at that. So if you have any performance testing needs, by all means, let me know. We can put together a example, but it's not a part of this build or this pipeline. If I missed something or if you'd like clarification, please let me know. For any of your application security, your application development, any sort of road mapping around artificial intelligence or making Claude work for your organization, please reach out. If you are watching this on YouTube or if you watched it on a different platform, like, subscribe, all the good things to help drive awareness for the good things that we're doing. And again, if you have any questions or comments, please do let me know. Thank you so much for watching.